So ladies and gentlemen, our first presenter for today is Mr. Amit Khanna, the Principal Architect for Amit Khanna Design Associates. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming him on stage.
Thank you for that. Just to give you a little background, I'm an architect, and I'm sure most of the architects in this room will agree that it's impossible to make over CP in 10 minutes. So what I'm going to try and do today is possibly set the agenda as to what a makeover for CP should look like, in the sense that, not in the sense of a physical building, but more in the sense of what are the possibilities and what are those things that are driving those possibilities. If you notice, it's subtitled The Right to the City. It's because this is something that has been lost in Delhi over the years. So I think I would like to begin by dwelling a little bit on the right to the city. This is a very famous quote for those of you who are interested in social politics of the city. It's by somebody called David Harvey. And one of the things that I want to stress here is that he says that it's a collective right. It's not an individual right to urban resources. It's the right that we all have to change our environment by changing ourselves. This is a figure that is, thrown around quite a bit these days. It's a figure from the UN Habitat Report. More than half of us now live in urban areas. And this is not just India, this is all over the world. In fact, in India, this number is substantially less. And that's down to a few things. Delhi and most other cities are essentially unaffordable. And there are several pressures on affordability. There's urban migration, that means we have a lot of people coming in. There's a lack of density. We have, when you compare it to the global average, a very poorly developed transport infrastructure for a city of this size. We have absolutely draconian developmental controls. I don't know if anyone here is from within the government, but we know that these development controls are very stifling in the sense that they don't allow what a private developer would consider normal. Let's just say that. And of course, we have misgovernance on a biblical level. Again, I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but we all know that it's all pervasive. So one of the biggest issues that I want to talk about is this, is that we don't really live in a garden city anymore. We don't live in the city that Lutyens envisioned. We live in a city of what used to be 1.7 million when Lutyens sort of had passed on already and the city was already 20 years old, and now we live in a city of 18 million, and that's the official estimate. That doesn't take into account migrant labor, it doesn't take into account unaccounted for people. So we're looking at close to about 20 million people, and still we preserve this notion that we're somehow living in this verdant garden with low-rise buildings. That's 10 times the urban growth. And I just would like you to sort of think about the one car here and the number of cars here. That's what's happened to Delhi in the last 50, 60 years. And yet we have this notion that no, CP is this beautiful thing that needs to be preserved. We have 250,000 people moving into Delhi every year. That's, despite all of that, the Delhi average is 11,320 people per square kilometer. The highest average in Delhi, so not surprisingly, goes up to about 36,000. But in CP, it's only 4,000. That's because nobody really lives there. And there's no place for anybody to live there because it's so empty. So what is a good strategy? What you see here is the skyline of CP taken from a slightly different angle, and it looks kind of impressive. You don't really see the flat, round circle of CP. You see tall buildings, and that's what Connaught Place needs. It needs more tall buildings. And what I'm going to try to do is, in the time that I have left, is just run very briefly through 4 strategies that can be used to increase density in Connaught Place. The first is that you must intensify along key routes. Now, this was done in the late 70s, 80s with Barakhamba Road and Kasturba Gandhi Marg. And tall buildings were allowed on these routes. You must infill small and medium sites. We have this silly rule in Delhi that the Archaeological Survey of India does not allow you to build anything within 200 meters of a protected monument. It's absolutely ridiculous. It should be on a case-by-case basis. We must permit large-scale new buildings and not just those that are owned by the government. And we must allow estate regeneration, which means that social housing, ministerial housing, that is just sort of kept at a ridiculously low density of 60 people per acre should be redeveloped, and that too by the government or in public-private partnership. So I'm just going to sort of stress again on these. When you intensify along key routes, you must revise building bylaws. You must allow for land aggregation and you must encourage mixed use. The original intent of CP was to have people with shops below and living above, and that has been sort of lost. You must infill small, medium sites, and that must be allowed next to historical areas. In fact, they should be allowed right next to them, in the sense touching them. Because if it is done properly, and I'm sure a lot of the architects in this room will agree, it is extremely possible to do it without compromising the buildings. There are many empty sites in Connaught Place. For whatever reason, they're disputed, the planning permission takes forever. These must be incentivized. You must incentivize evictions of low-paying tenants, and you must create a system by which permissions can be sped up. You don't have to wait for 1 year in order to get permission to make a building. And large-scale estate regeneration. So the government owns vast tracts of land in and around Connaught Place, and that is lying extremely underutilized. And herein lies the opportunity to create public-private partnerships that will allow for the creation of additional supply. And you must engage with the street. So I want to close with this. It's slightly provocative. This is a figure from Ricky Burdett at LSE Cities. This is the potential reduction of urban infrastructure capital requirements over the next 15 years if we create compact urban growth. And compact urban growth is the key, because what is the cost of creating a metro to Greater Noida, and what is the cost of creating a metro to, beyond Faridabad? When within the city we have all of this unused, unallocated space. You're losing valuable agricultural land at the fringes just to preserve what is considered a monument to Lutyens. Well, you know what? We don't care anymore. We need to have a dense city. And that is the cost of it. That is what we will lose if we don't do this. Thank you.